Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with the real Nate Payo. The show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
From author Donnie Bovine comes the book, How to Be a Success Champion, available on Amazon. After years of living other people's dreams, author Donnie Bovine decided to jump out on his own and start a business, thinking it would be easy. Instead, he had a rude awakening and quickly understood that he had spent 20 years being an employee and had no idea how to be a business owner. His business was tanking, and he was on the brink of losing everything when he decided to fight for business freedom. In this must-read and life-changing book, author Donnie Bovine shares with readers his story intermingled with lessons learned from his mistakes and his failures. In How to Be a Success Champion, you will find advice the author received from mentors and how he went from zero to a six-figure business. The author walks you through the steps of how to get out of your own way, how to play the game of business and win, find your strengths, how to network effectively, how to build a personal brand, how to create champions for your business, how to get great at sales, how to take complete ownership of you and your business. How to Be a Success Champion from author Donnie Bovine, available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback editions. Order your copy right now. It makes a great book for corporate events too. How to Be a Success Champion from author Donnie Bovine, available on Amazon.
Hello. Welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Payo. Of course, I'm your host, Nate Payo. I'm joined today with Phil Pelucha with billionairesinboxes.com. I'm super excited to have him on the show because we've actually been chatting for about 20 minutes instead of recording, and we've had some amazing conversations. I want to bring that to you. So just a quick brief bio on Phil. He's empowering 1 billion entrepreneurs to achieve their success. He interviews the best mentors, most inspiring business leaders, and professional development coaches, providing infotainment that helps and works. Actionable steps and a golden nugget a minute viewing. He works with many of the leading professional development coaches, which allows him to empower as many people as possible in both broadcasting and live events across Africa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to be here. I'm really looking forward to it. And as I said, you were saying before, we had a good chat in I always call that the virtual green room. Yeah, you know what? Some great conversations happen in there.
When I started my podcast, I think everybody's like, oh, do like a pre-meet, and I would do them, and I'd be like, I gotta end this conversation like right now because we're having all the good stuff, and I'm gonna go on and recreate it. And then like you try to ask the same questions, and the answers aren't as spontaneous. It's a little bit, it's not bad, but it's just kind of like we should just like rolled with it to begin with. So I kind of stopped doing the pre-interviews.
Well, do you know what? I mean, I think it's the same for every podcaster. It's nice to kind of build up a bit of a rapport beforehand, but yeah, you can very easily start going, right, stop. That's perfect. Just don't say it because that's perfect for the show. Yeah. Don't waste it.
So I'm pretty sure you're my first guest from Africa, and we were talking about, this global networking thing and the power of it. And like before I started podcasting, like I was just kind of concerned with like, hey, how would I find guests and be local and be like, what is somebody across the globe gonna provide for me? Like on paper, it's like, hey, well, this just doesn't make sense. Like we'll never like interact. We probably don't know the same people, but because of Zoom, because of COVID, it's just like perfect storm of events. You're just like, hey, I can't go meet people in a face-to-face thing. So I'll just have these virtual meetings, and I started connecting with people in like Europe, in Australia, New Zealand. And I was talking to her yesterday. I've probably there's a gal named Lauren Kress we connected like to talk about doing a podcast. We talked for like an hour about that. Then I did her show for like an hour. Then she did my show for an hour. And they were like, hey, let's just get on the phone for like a conversation for an hour. And then like we had another conversation just last night.
I love
it's just
it when
like
that happens.
it's like we're completely on opposite sides of the world, but we're having these amazing conversations and kind of networking. I think it's important to remember that like networking isn't about like an immediate, like you do this for me, I'll do that for you, but it kind of builds out over time. And like these relationships you establish, like you might not have a connection that you can support and help for a few years and vice versa, but it's important to engage these people, have conversations and keep those conversations warm so that they don't go cold. You're like, hey, where's that cool guy I met? But it's 3 years now. So now it's weird to call him up,
Well, actually, I mean, relationships, you never know when they're going to come back to fruition or when it's going to be helpful. A prime example of that is the guy who heads up my sales. So he actually heads up our engagement in New Zealand. He does New Zealand and Australia. He actually worked for me 6 years ago for a completely different company. I think we didn't speak for maybe 4 or 5 years. Nothing happened. He just went traveling around the world and he's 12 hours ahead of me. So we didn't really like each other's Facebook stuff, but that was about it. He found himself in a situation. He wanted to get on the phone and talk it through. I was having an awesome day and there was some great stuff happening. And he was like, what happened in the last 5 or 6 years? Because you're like on cloud 9 and loving what you're doing. And I'm miserable and hate what I'm doing. And like, how did that happen? So we got talking and he came and joined us on this journey. And now I'd like to think he's on cloud 9 too. So it's all just about timing. That's all it is.
Yeah, very much so. So that kind of leads into my first question. What is your thoughts on luck? Are people lucky? Do you believe in luck?
No, I don't believe in luck. Okay, how do I word this? So others may even disagree with me on this. So some of my own mentors might disagree with me on this, but I don't personally believe in luck. I think what luck is our subconscious mind not wanting us to feel impressed with what we've done. I mean, how many times do we say, oh yeah, I can do that, but that's easy? Well, it's only easy because you know how to do it. So you're putting yourself down. It's not easy if you haven't got a clue how to do it, but we do that as humans the whole time. We say, oh, well, I could never do that because that's really complicated, but all this stuff that I do know how to do, oh, well, that's easy. And you just dismiss it straight away. And that's what luck is. I mean, how many times do you hear that? So there's 2 types of times when I hear the word luck. Number one is when people go, oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. Or I was just, it was really lucky. I managed to do this. Well, you're sapping your own power. You're taking away the pat on the back that you should be giving yourself and just playing it down. Like if you're not going to be your cheerleader, who else is going to be? So there's the first time you hear luck. The second time you hear luck is when people go, oh, aren't you so lucky? Or you're so lucky you have this. Or, I mean, I hear it all the time. Oh, well, you're lucky. You've got a TV network. It's like, that wasn't luck. That was like hours and hours and hours of production and shows and graft and passion and tears and blood, sweat, and everything else that went into that. That wasn't luck. You can't call me lucky because I have a nice car because I worked my butt off for 10 years to earn it. That's not luck. That was graft. So no, I'm not. I don't believe in luck. I think we have the ability to create the life that we want to live in whichever way we want to do that. I think most people walk around so scared of actually achieving their potential that luck is a nice way to hide behind it. Oh yeah, well that was really good, but it was just lucky.
Yeah, it's like an excuse, like, oh, that person got lucky, they didn't deserve it. But you said 2 things that kind of resonated with me, and the first one was this idea of what you kind of dismiss because you know how to do it really well. And I think we don't see the value in that a lot of times. And I tell people it's like, what you know, but you don't know what, like, if you look into somebody else, you don't know what they don't know. So 100%. Like when you go like, hey, I know how to do this, like, it's like, okay, well, somebody else doesn't, but it doesn't resonate with you. Like, why don't you get this? Because I know how to do it. So like, you should, like, I'm nothing special. Like, clearly you should be able to do this too. And so you don't realize that there's value in the knowledge you talk about. And then I think once you kind of realize that value, it kind of led to this, like, this story. It's probably a meme floating around where it's like this artist draws this like amazing, beautiful piece of art, like a painting, and he does it in like 15 minutes. And somebody's like, hey, I'm going to how much for that? It's like, it's $1,000. Like, it's $1,000. You just took 15 minutes to do this. And it's like, no, it took me like 20 years to get the skills to do that 15 minutes of work. And so sometimes like, I think the stuff we're really, really good at, it doesn't feel valuable because it does feel easy. It's just like, well, there's nothing special to this knowledge. Like, I know this knowledge. And then you kind of start looking around, you go, oh, but you know what? There's other people that don't have it. Like, I can add value. I can either be a weakness, somebody else's weakness, and fill it in with a strength, or I can teach somebody what I know, how to overcome it. And there's value in that. But I think a lot of times as humans, we just disregard it because it's like, hey, we know it, so everybody else must know it too. You know?
I mean, it's like networking. It's like, what are you networking for if it's not to add value to someone or to find somebody to add value to you? And how can you do either of those two things if you don't know what your value is because you just dismiss it as lucky? You've got to know what you're good at and what you're not. And you've just got to embrace that. I mean, I know there are things that I'm really, really good at, and I know the things that I really suck at. So I make sure that I surround myself with people that are really good at the bits that I suck at. Why? Because I don't need them to be good at the bits that I'm good at, because I'm really good at those bits. And if you just continue to build on that basis, you're good to go. But you're not going to be able to do any of that or even start to build those foundations until you recognize who and what you are and what you're good at. We talk about going from the industrial mindset revolution of a time-based currency to a solution-based currency. And then that analogy you just used of it took you 15 minutes, how can it be $1,000? Well, you're being paid for your work and for the effort and what you did. You're not being paid for the time that it took you to do it. You're not on an hourly rate, you know?
Yeah. And something along those lines that's been a relatively new concept to me, like a shift in dynamic, is the company I work for. We started like looking at software programs, and you like look at and these are for like big companies, and they're high dollar ticket items. They're like $100,000 a year subscription. And, like we're podcasting and stuff like that. So you're looking at like, do I want to pay $40 a month for this service or $20? So it's like $100,000 a year. That's a ridiculous amount of money. And then you go, but it's basically like getting 4 full-time employees that would have cost me $400,000 for $100,000. And so I think you have to start relooking at what is valuable to yourself. So if you say, would somebody pay me $1,000 for my efforts? You go, maybe that seems like a lot of money, but what if like your $1,000 value proposition saved them $10,000 or brought them $10,000 in? Then it's a really good deal for them. It's like a complete steal.
Well, I'll give you a real life example. So our mentorship program usually runs at around $3,000 US for a 4-week program, which will take somebody from the very beginning of not having a podcast at all, right the way through to being ready, coded up, knowing what they're doing, ready to go and hit the world with a few episodes created. But that's specifically aimed at businesses to help them start growing that. Now, so take 3,000 US. Most recruitment firms in the US, their average recruitment fee, so their staffing fee, would be between 3 and 5 at the smaller level. The larger guys are doing 50, 60, 100K plus, but even just the small deals. So the price of the 4-week course essentially is going to be the cost of one deal, right? Mm-hmm. Are you telling me that you can't make 2 deals extra a year based off this? I think you should be doing that a week based off this, because that's what other people are doing. So yes, it might be costing you $3,000, but that $3,000 is going to be making you in excess of 50, 60. The people that we've trained this to, I now have 5 businesses in the States alone that now earn more than $1 million as a direct result of the fact we plugged in a podcast into what they do. And they've become known as the expert in their field. It's incredible.
Yeah, that is. So that kind of leads to the little question of like, describe your business a little bit and what you kind of are up to, so people can get an idea of what it is you do.
So Billionaires in Boxes is essentially an entrepreneur network based in Africa. We talk about introducing the best of Africa to the world and the best of the world to Africa. Why Africa? Well, the thing that's been holding Africa back for such a long time has been connectivity. That's becoming less and less of an issue. According to all major forecasts, Africa is the next emerging market, and the next 10 years worth minimum of technological advancements are going to be coming out of that continent. So that's why we're keen to introduce the best of the world to Africa and vice versa. So it's really exciting stuff. That kind of takes several forms. A lot of the time it takes the form of content and working with professional development coaches, both across Africa, to bring them to fruition. but also bringing some of the best motivational speakers, trainers, entrepreneurs, mentors from all over the world to do televised content, podcast content, and live events and movies across Africa. Our bread and butter, essentially, if you want to sum it up, is we help businesses that have a message to spread that message with the relevant people in the world and benefit and grow from it as a result.
Yeah. So how did you kind of like fall into this business, decide this is something you want to do? I mean, you didn't clearly wake up, 30 years ago and be like, hey, I'm going to be a billionaire in my boxers. Like,
no, not at all. So it all actually happened by accident, as often the best things do. It just kind of happened organically when it was supposed to. So I had I owned a recruitment business, and I hated cold calling, and I was sick of email marketing because I was like, I don't read any of this stuff, and I hate these calls. So why would I do this to somebody else? And I was like, how would I like to engage with somebody? So I went back and I looked at the last 5 purchases that I'd made. One of them I'd actually searched for deliberately online. The other 4 I'd been introduced to by podcasts. It had been a guest on a podcast talking about something, and I've gone, that's a great idea. I'm going to go check it out. So I'd been sold to without being sold to. And it was kind of like a light bulb moment. And I went, well, I'm calling the CEOs of these companies to talk to them about staffing solutions, and they're not calling me back. Why? Well, even I don't want to talk about staffing solutions. That's not sexy. That's really boring. So of course they're not calling me back. Whereas if I called them and say, listen, I'd love to invite you onto a podcast. I know who you are. I know what you do. I know what you do as a business. I'd love to hear your story, kind of how you've grown. I think that could be really inspirational, but also learn more about what you're doing as a business right now and what the next sort of 12 months looks like for you. You get a yes to that every day of the week, and people buy people. So you spend 45 minutes, an hour with somebody on a podcast and build a relationship with them, talking about things that they're passionate about. I'm not saying lie and force it. If you don't resonate with the person, then thank them for their time, use the content and move on. But if you really resonate with that person and they're resonating with you, it'd be foolish not to have a conversation at the end to say, this is really cool. I think we should probably grab a coffee at some point, or, we should jump on another call. It's not a podcast because I don't know about you, but I felt there's probably stuff we could do together. The amount of times that people would get to the end of the call and go, you're in recruitment, aren't you? We're doing this, this, and this at the moment. Can you help us? And it was like the easiest form of business development. So I did away with cold calling. I did away with email marketing. I reduced the spend on Facebook and Instagram ads right down. And it changed our business for the better because we were then podcasting. I then had the opportunity to buy into a marketing business, which I had a friend who was an incredible marketer, great at what he did, but sucked at winning new clients, which sounds crazy, but he was really good at telling other people's stories, but not his own. So we got him a podcast. We built the podcast around that. That then grew that side of the business, and then we actually sold out of that business as well. And what I found was fascinating was nobody cared about my recruitment or marketing solutions anymore. Everybody just wanted to know how I'd done that. Like, how did you do that with podcasts? How are you now the guy that the British government is sending to China to go and talk at the largest tech event in China about how all of this stuff comes together and how they can leverage it, which is true. The UK government paid me to go to Shanghai and talk at the Mobile World Congress about marketing and how all this was going to come together and how we could global network and use tech for that, VR, AR, mixed reality, podcasting, you name it, right? And like, how did you do that? Like, how has that happened? And it happened as a direct result of podcasts, because the more amazing people you speak to, the more amazing things happen. So that was where it all really came from, is that nobody was interested in my recruitment or marketing solutions anymore. They wanted me to teach them how to do this. And then that then became a radio show across Africa, which then got picked up by a TV network, which became a TV show, which I'm really proud of. Goes out across 40 million homes across Southern Africa. We're about to add 3 more channels across the rest of Africa. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But how can I sum up what I personally do within BIB? I basically talk to amazing people and get to learn loads of stuff, get to inspire as many people as are watching and are listening as are getting involved. And it's all just a win-win-win. I mean, I love what we do. It's awesome.
Well, it's funny you say like your path to, I guess, this networking path that you developed is like, I've been in the buyer side of the table like almost all my career. I've always been the person that like people came and sold stuff to me. And you get spammy emails, you go to networking events and you get like hounded. People like, we pressure you. They're always like, if you got something going on, they're calling you because they want to talk to you, take you to lunch. But if you don't have it, they're like blowing you off. And you're just like,
Yep.
man, this is like really annoying. But there's like a lot of people in my business that developed personal friendships with. And I was like, why do I like doing business with those people? And it's because I like them. They treat me like a human. They're looking to support me too. And then when it's time to go do business, and it's like, hey, we got something for you. Let's work together. Let's figure out how it's going to work. And one of my good I like this word. It's called friendors, which is your friend that's a vendor combined together. Cool. Friendor. So she gave me this book. It's called Digital Persuasion, and it's really about how do you do better cold calling on the internet in the digital world. And everybody thinks like, oh, the blast of email spams, like I don't read those. They go in the delete folder, unsubscribe, or blast you with like LinkedIn messages like, hey, here's what I am and this is how I'm going to save your life. And you're like, I don't care. You're not going to. Like, we're not going to do that. And then you end up in this bucket of like, do not talk to people. But this book was really interesting because it goes, here's how you do it. You figure out who they are. You write a little message. It's about like 2 or 3 sentences long, no more. Yep. You never use the word I in it. It's all about you. Yep. And then you just find something that you relate to that they have. Like if like you're into, soccer, or I guess you probably call it football, you know, you like, okay, you like this thing. Like I like that same team. Like I might mention a comment like, hey, something relative to that. Yep. And then did you hear about this? And it's just like, you make it a personal introduction to them. You give them some useful information. And then you're like, hey, if you ever need anything, I don't think you say like you ever need anything. You just kind of like drop it in there. And because your message is so different, nobody's seen it, they're curious. Yep. And then they go look at you. And then they go, hey, let's have a conversation. It sparks a conversation. And you go, okay. And then they go, well, what do you do? Oh, you do what I'm looking for? Like, let's talk business. And it leads to that conversation. Or it goes, we don't have a connection to do, but I know somebody who might like your services, let me make an introduction. And then it becomes a warm introduction, stuff like that. And I think that podcasting is like that type of connection, but on steroids. Because like you nailed it on the head. You go, hey, I want to call this high-powered executive to sell to. He's not taking your call. He's not returning your email, and his secretary ain't going to let you get a meeting with him if you show up unannounced. Like you're not going to get there. But if you call and you say, hey, I got a podcast and I want you to come on, tell me about what all this cool stuff you're going on. Sure thing, I'll come to that. And all of a sudden you're like, I like to say it's like you're punching a little bit out of your weight class. You can reach out to somebody that like, one, you probably have no other reason to reach out to anyways. They're not going to return your call. Yep. You get you could get an author, you love their book. You call them up, say, hey, I want to talk to you about your book for an hour. No way. I want you to come on my podcast and pick your brain about your book. You probably don't word it that way, but sure, let's do it. You come on, and all of a sudden you're connecting to these people you never would have had a chance to. And then, hey, who else can I help you with? And like all of a sudden they're introducing you to their cool people. You're giving them some cool leads too. And it just, over time, that's so powerful. And that was kind of my journey. I was like, hey, when I was localized to my industry, I started doing I thought I just started accelerating my career. And I was like, what would happen if I just did it? I didn't think of it as globally. I just kind of thought about it like it's indiscriminately, like just like, hey, let's meet everybody that's kind of cool and see where it goes. And in a year, 2 years, 3 years time, that these connections are going to grow and evolve to ideas you'd never imagined. And wouldn't that be cool to see where that ends up? And so that's been like kind of my path. And I think what you nailed on the head is just like you have this way with podcasting to easily connect with people you might not have otherwise had. 100%. And it grows your network exponentially. And I think it accelerates it a lot quicker.
It's the value of knowing other people. So you mentioned earlier, for example, right at the beginning of the show, you were saying, well, I'm going to interview people local to me because what do I have in common with people around the world? Like, how are we going to kind of help each other with that? But whereas a great answer for that, if I'm honest, is, I grew up in sport. That was my original passion. It was my original background. I played professionally in the UK, and then I ended up playing and coaching across centralized Europe as well. So I've literally played for European teams and been the foreign player. And, you know, if you have 11 players, let's use soccer as an example, right? You got football, you got 11 players on a pitch. I don't know if you follow it. I'm a big Liverpool fan. I think there's probably 3 or 4 English players in the entire Liverpool squad. I think there's one of them who's local to Liverpool, and that's Trent Alexander-Arnold. There'll be a couple of the younger guys coming through, but I mean, in terms of the main squad, you've got like maybe one who's local out of like 15, 20 people. So clearly, just because somebody's local doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person to help you develop. So my attitude was always very different when it came to global stuff, because I knew that the best teams I'd ever played in and played against and seen play had a mixture. They'd taken the best winger from South America. They'd taken the best defender from Germany. They'd taken the best goalkeeper from Italy. And they combined all of these incredible people. So my attitude was always, well, as a world, we aren't all progressing at the same pace. There are just look at the economies. Some countries are doing well. Some countries are in a load of trouble. Some countries have great connectivity. Other countries have horrific connectivity. So we're not all developing at the same pace. So it would be foolish to assume that we can't A, give value to other people, and B, have value given to us. So every project, it didn't matter what it was. It didn't matter whether it was a marketing project, a podcast project, a recruitment project, made no difference, right? My attitude was always, I'm going to go around the world. I'm going to speak to the people that I know and trust and say, this is what I'm doing. Get them empowered, get them pumped up, and say, who do you know that I should be talking to? And then by the end of that week, when I'm having a conversation on Skype with 10 people globally, they're the 10 best people, and they've each been recommended, which is why they're there. And now I'm starting to build something. I will take that team to the field or into business or into the boardroom 100 days out of 100 before I build a local team.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that idea too, because like going back to your soccer football analogy is like, okay, if you just took all people local, what's going to happen? They all have there's probably a small group of coaches that showed them how to play soccer, like the way they grew up from a kid to playing professional. So they kind of have like the same strategies. They're used to playing against the same people. They're used to like the same, like, I guess, maybe logistics or maybe ideas or theories around how you play the game and what's the best way to staff the field and arrange stuff. And all of a sudden you start bringing people from outside that. Like now you're bringing different ideas into your mix. You have people that came up with different experiences, and it shapes your reality. And you go, well, we've never done it this way. Well, you've never done it this way because nobody ever showed you how it could be done correctly. And so, like, to me, getting outside of your immediate circle of influence, like if you go, hey, like who else do I know? If I just talk to the same 10 people, I'm gonna be a mixture of those 10 people. So what if they're all homogenous and they all kind of grew up in the same neighborhood and they all kind of had the same teachers and they all kind of had the same experiences? Like, sure, you can do things with it. There are people but I think you're going to be exposed to a lot more stuff and you can shape reality. And I think you get a different appreciation for life when you go, hey, not everybody had the same experiences I had in life, and I'm going to look at things differently. And sometimes it's like, hey, I didn't know this was a problem for you guys, but I know how to solve it. Like, let me show you how to solve this problem because I've been exposed to it so much. I don't know if we were talking about this on the podcast, right? Or we were talking about before, where it's like you didn't know your value of what you are because it's what you know.
100%. You play it down because it's all you know. So I have a saying that I use quite a lot, which is that you should make more decisions with your heart because your head doesn't know any more than you do. And it's so true because it's like when people say things to you and say, oh, you can't do that or that won't work, right? Well, for them, that's right. From where they are right now, they're absolutely right. They can't do that, which is why they're telling you can't do that. But it doesn't mean that you can't. Look at the NBA. Those guys are flying and dunking all over the place. I can't dunk. So but if I go to one of them and say, well, I can't dunk, so you can't dunk. Well, watch this. They're going to jump over my head and they're going to dunk it. So
well, it kind of reminds me of like when the Dream Team first came out in the United States and they played in the Olympics. And there's been probably a lot of hype because the Michael Jordan documentary was out. I didn't watch it, so I don't know the details. But I remember they were just so head and shoulders above the rest of the world. They just dominated.
Mm-hmm.
And now when the national teams come together, it's not the case. It's maybe that they've taken the best people from around the world and put them into the NBA, and they've learned and raised the game.
The same with the Premier League, 100%.
And then they take what they've learned and they show it to the people that are in their group, and then you have a growing market of international players and international professional leagues, and it's like, okay, like everything just kind of like right. I love the all ships rise from the tide analogy, even though it's been said a million times, but it's so true. It's like, hey, if you're in this position to bring everybody up, you're going to rise with it. Everybody 100%. Goes up together. And if there's winners versus losers, then you're playing, I think, an end game that's a little bit cutthroat, and it doesn't have a big picture in mind. And you're going to have less success in the long run than maybe some immediate.
See, but what I would say to that is we have winners and losers in what we do. We do a lot of value add and we help a lot of people, but there's also losers in this situation. And that's okay. So I always say to my team, I never want you to try and convince anybody. Never convince anybody to work with us. They either get it or they don't. And the reason I have so much confidence with that is, we have billionaires. We have some of the, if you were to list the top 10 professional development coaches in the world, I'd say we probably work with 7 or 8 of them already, and they're going to be working with the rest of them pretty soon. These people have bought into what we do, seen the value of it, and are throwing their time, effort, resources, and events and courses and everything else at helping us to achieve that goal. So if Bob, the MD of ABC Limited, doesn't think that this is going to work or it's right for him, I don't need to convince Bob. Because for every Netflix, there will be a Blockbuster. And that's okay, because I don't want to work with Blockbuster. I want to work with Netflix.
Yes, exactly.
And that's okay. That's fine, because for you to seek an advantage, it means that you're seeking an advantage over somebody else. So great example, we were talking about how we use the podcast for business development. So I'll give you a prime example of how we're using it today, right? So we know the value that we can add with the recruitment businesses. We've worked with loads of them. We're now into the multi-millions in terms of how much additional revenue these companies are making as a result of having a podcast. Now, African market, as we said off air, is a lot further away than that. So the number of podcasters in Africa doubled last year, which is an incredible stat. Even more so when you realize they're at the same stage the United States was when it comes to podcasting in 2003, which means that they've got like 17, 18 years worth of growth here. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think we were saying this off air. If you start a podcast in the US, you've got at least double figures competitors straight away. In Africa, that's not the case. You can come up against 2 or 3 and you can wipe the floor with them quite quickly, because you can learn the lessons that the West has particularly done well with podcasting. So how we've been doing that is we've been making lists of, we're using recruitment businesses at the moment. So I'll give you a great example. We are making lists in each of the sectors that we know work well, because we've already done it with other partners. We've already got people we can introduce them to make it work. We're approaching the top 5 agencies in that space in 3 of the major cities across Southern Africa at the moment, and then we'll start to work our way up. So there'll be a fair amount of people there to target. We're going to go and have a conversation with them. So there's going to be maybe 4 sectors that we'll do this for. So there'll be 15 people for each sector, and we'll do it for 4 sectors. There or thereabouts. And what we'll do is we contact the CEOs of each of those companies, and we're usually on LinkedIn, and we'll say, this is who we are. This is why we resonated with you. We'd like to connect and talk to you about how you could use podcasting. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure most will respond, because they'll look at the network and people will kind of go, okay, we'll have a conversation. But we're not afraid to say, look, we can't work with all of you. It doesn't work that way. There's no point me giving all 5 of you the same advantage, because yes, you've moved forward, but you've all moved forward at the same pace. It was pointless. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I give it to one of you, it's a game changer. So sometimes you get people that are like, I'm not sure this would work for us and we're not interested. And I always say, listen, that's absolutely fine. To change somebody is the hardest thing in the world. So I don't want to do that. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. I'm a big believer in follow your gut. However, I also really don't like conflict, Mr. Client. So I'm going to say this so that in 6 months' time, you don't ring me up all annoyed, okay? I am going to speak to the other 4, and one of them is going to take it, right? So if you're okay with that not being you, then that's cool. If you want to go away and give this some more thought, let's arrange another call for the next couple of days. But we're going to be making a decision over the next week or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then you usually start getting at least 2 or 3 of them competing against each other against, well, listen, we're better than them. We can give more value than them. And we're working with this client who I think could be interested in working with you. So we can introduce you to them. And now the network grows even further.
Yeah.
And that's how we've been using podcasting for business development. We also use it in the way that I said earlier with guests that we get on. And it's not designed for that purpose. I'm not trying to sell to them, but if I have an amazing conversation with somebody and there's an opportunity to do business together and I know it's a win-win, why wouldn't I mention it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And what's the worst they can say? No. Nothing's really changed. And do you know what? I've kind of got to a stage in my life now where I'm a firm believer. If somebody says no, or if you push on that door and it doesn't open, don't force it. Forcing it is never what's right for your life. Have you ever noticed that when things are going really well, it's completely effortless? It's like you're just in flow, like you're like floating around the room like, oh, I am amazing at this. Every time I pick up the phone, it's another sale, and it's just so effortless. You have one of those games in sport. Anybody who's played sport will instantly remember the game. Doesn't matter whether it was in school or whatever. There was a game that you just dominated, that you just looked like a professional athlete and made everybody else look second class. You didn't work hard for that. That felt effortless. In fact, you probably felt energized by what you were doing. Mm-hmm. So it's like perpetual motion, isn't it? The positive energy gives you more energy so you can do it even more. And that's the whole point about getting yourself into flow. And that's why I'm a big believer in global networking. Have those conversations. Some people you will meet, you will seriously resonate with, and incredible things will happen. Other people you meet, you may learn something from them. They may learn something from you. You've helped other people with it. You don't have to do business with everybody. You only need a handful of real fans and loyal people for your business. And the rest will take care of themselves. If they really love what you do and what you do for them, they'll recommend you to others. They'll recommend people to your show. Give you an example. I haven't booked a guest for my show in 6-7 weeks. Not one, because about 3 or 4 a week booking with our diary, having been recommended from other sort of top speakers. And I got one of the guys the other day from New York bestsellers list. He was like, oh, I know 3 other bestsellers. Let me just introduce you to them. Done. Yeah. So now I've got 4 bestsellers.
There you go. It works out great when you get your referrals. So let me ask you a question. What does it mean to you to be all in on an idea or a topic?
You have to use your emotion in there. I think it's an emotion on a project. So you've got to have emotion invested in it, I think is what I would say. Is too often I think people will have an above the shoulders discussion, sort of an intellectual discussion, or they'll use something like logic. I mean, I don't like logic anyway, because logic is technically just stuff that somebody else gave you as to why you think you can't do something. So logic doesn't actually help. But I think being all in on something for me is the ability to understand not just what it looks like and what it's going to do, but what it's going to feel like and how it's going to feel and how it's going to empower and what it's going to do for other people. I think if you can picture the emotion of it and picture in your mind what it's going to look like, the missing ingredient then is action. So you picture, this is what I do every time I want to get into something. I sit and meditate on the subject so that I'm just constantly feeling it. I put myself in the shoes of how's it going to feel when the show's been out for 10 episodes and we're now getting these amazing recommendations from people, which we now are, and I love them. But how's it going to feel when people whose books I have on my shelf are leaving me messages to say, just been on Billionaires in Boxes. I absolutely love the series. You've got to go check it out. Like, how's that going to make me feel? And I got giddy with it and I got the excitement. So then I started to go, well, what does that look like? How do I get that person to leave me that recommendation? Well, I do a podcast with them. Okay, so what's the easiest way to get them on a podcast? Ask them. So guess what the action was that I took next?
You asked them.
I asked them because if I go out and ask 10 people, 5 of them might say yes, but those 5 people might know the other 5 people.
Yeah. I've never thought of it that way. Like usually you go, hey, you got to ask 10 people to get 2 yeses and you can get 8 nos. And that's why I've always been a fan of, like, a lot of people in sales go, hey, you want to get to yes as quick as you can. I go, no, do the opposite. Get to no as quick as you can.
Yeah.
Like, the faster you get to know, the faster you're going to realize you're not with somebody. So I'm like warts and all things. Like, hey,
Yep.
here's who we are, unabashed, just everything about us. Like, you like us or you don't. And
I love it.
and if they go, yeah, I still kind of dig you, then it's like, okay, well, let me tell you some more bad stuff. And did you just get to the quicker you can get them to say no, you quit wasting your time, and you're going to just be focused on the yes. And then it becomes, like you said, effortless flow
100%.
connections. But it's pretty cool that you said, like, hey, if you get yeses from some people, some of those other people that are no's, like you said, like, hey, I'm a best-selling best times author, and I went on this show, and I know you're one.
Yeah.
I went on this show. Are you going to say, no, I don't do shows? Like, well,
Here's an example. I never got an email back from Tony Robbins. I'd love Tony Robbins on the show, and I never got an email back. Why did I not get an email back? Because he has an entire team of people to stop me getting an email back. That's their whole job, right?
Yes.
Of course, I wasn't going to get an email back from Tony Robbins going, sure, person I've never heard of. Let me give you some of my really valuable time. However, now I'm friends and have 2 mentors who are very close friends with him. I'm talking and working with a publicist who's his publicist. It's now being discussed. Do you want a WhatsApp introduction to him? So,
yes.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. No. Let me think about that.
I don't know about that.
But this is the point is look, I didn't go and find those people because they were friends with Tony. That's not how that worked. In fact, 2 of the people that are friends with Tony, I had no idea they even knew him. But it was when you put that out there and you say, this is what I want to do, too many people hit that first stumbling block, and they get bitter about it. I emailed Tony Robbins and he never emailed me back. I always thought that guy was a really nice guy. I saw his Netflix thing and I've read his books and never even got an email back. What a douche. What a douche. Are you serious? Like, he's off busy helping millions of people. I'm sorry he's not inconsiderate enough to just drop everything he's doing for all these charities and wonderful people just to come and help you, this person he's never heard of. Don't stop there. Keep going, because, my attitude with that was, okay, well, we're not big enough for Tony to come on yet. So keep getting bigger. How do I get bigger? How do I get to the point where I can go to him and say, here's 5 of your friends. Here's 5 people that you're really close to in the whole world that I've interviewed, and you're still not replying me back.
Yeah.
He's going to respond to that message. I need to get to the point where I've got something else to offer, and this is one of the things that I've always done. And it was a film that really inspired me. I'm sure you've seen it. It was with Will Smith, and it was The Pursuit of Happiness.
Yes, I've seen that.
And the reason I love that film so much is now he does this because he doesn't have enough hours in the day, because obviously he has to pick up his son from school and all that kind of stuff that was going on. But he starts at the very top of his phone tree every single time. He always starts with the guy at the top of the tree, or guy or girl at the top of the tree. And so do I. And the reason for that is I won't ever let anybody tell me what I can and can't do. So, the world's #1 passive income coach, a fantastic guy called Travis Fox. Travis is my mentor. How did that come about? I messaged him because I knew he was in a movie, and I said, do you want to plug the movie and plug what you're doing and come and have a chat with me? We had an hour-long show. We then had about another 60 to 70 minutes after the show of having a great conversation. And I asked, and I said, would you be my mentor? Would you help me? And he said yes. And ever since then, he's opened up his phone book. It's been like the greatest gift. All these people are now coming because he resonates with the message. He resonates with these people. So now he's introducing them. And it all came about just because you asked the question. So why would I not go for the people right at the top? Why would I say, well, do you know what? Instead of getting the best yoga person on the planet, I'm going to go and interview the best yoga person within a 60-mile radius of my house. Why would I put that limitation on myself?
Yeah.
And if you think about, if you're looking at this from a sales perspective, because we've been talking about how you use podcasting for sales, you're right. The CEO probably isn't the person who's going to make the decision on marketing or recruitment or software sales or CRM or whatever the hell it is you're trying to flog them, right? They're probably not the person to make that decision. But people by people, and that person's in a place of authority. You can learn about whether or not you resonate with that business. And if you do, what better recommendation could you get than, actually, yeah, do you know what? I'll introduce you to our head of IT because they're currently going through a technical thing at the moment I think could be quite useful for you to have a conversation. It's completely away from me. I don't touch it. I don't really understand that stuff, but I'd be happy for you to make an introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Message them back. Thank you so much for your time in the interview. It was really incredible. Could you make that email introduction? Now you've been introduced to somebody by their boss. Their boss, who, by the way, has just spent an hour doing a show with you because you want to be doing some work together.
Yeah.
That's not a difficult conversation. That's not a difficult sell. That's, hey, head of tech, this guy's introduced me. Let's have a chat. What's your problem? How can I help?
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because a lot of times the CEO is just like, hey, I'll just make an introduction, and they're indifferent to the outcome. But the person that gets the message is like, CEO said I need to do this. Like, I need to make this work. And so, it may
100%.
not always work, but they're I think more apt to figure out a way to make it work. And then when they go, hey, we're going to pick this guy and go with them, but I have to report to the CEO what we're doing. The CEO's not going to go like, who are these people? I don't know who they are. Like,
great guy.
Yeah, like, oh, cool.
100%.
You picked them up. Like, let's sign off on this decision.
100%. And even if they say no, you do something that I call the 6 and 6 rule, which is 6 people always have 6 competitors, right? Yeah. So what you do is you pick them up, and if that company is a hard no, like there's nothing to sell to there, there's nothing to stop you going to their competitors, say, hey, listen, I had James, CEO of ABC Limited, on the other day. Sounds like they're doing some really interesting stuff. I was asking around the industry, and your name kept coming up. Would you love to come on the show and talk about what it is that you're doing? Yeah, damn straight I would, because my competitor's been on and is getting some attention. So I'm coming on to have a chat with you and start the whole process all over again, because you only need one of them to say yes. Mm-hmm. You don't need all of these competitors, all of these 6 competitors say yes to you. Work with 1 in every 6, and there's plenty to go around.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. So let's talk about billionaires and boxers. Who are the people that are your core clients, the people you work the best with, who let us like rave about you, but you rave about them, and when you work together, it just feels like you're in that flow state?
Yeah, so I think there's probably 2 very distinct types of people then that falls into. So there's personal development coaches. They love us because obviously their job is about empowering people and reaching people and helping as many people as possible. We have a platform that we can teach them how to reach even more people and plug them into a network full of all of these awesome people. So nothing is going to help your business, no matter what it is you do, better than plugging in some of the most amazing people in the planet to it. You put amazing people in a room, amazing things are going to happen. Simple as that. For sure. The other group of people are entrepreneurs and business owners that have a story to sell. I'm not talking about I have a product to flog. I'm talking about you really do have a message to sell, whether that's the message of the great culture you've developed within your company, or whether that's the message of why people should be working for you, or whether that's just why people should be listening to you to answer some questions. I'll give a great piece of advice to your listeners, because it's an awesome website, right? And it, again, stuff like this didn't exist when I first started in podcasting. I wish it did. It's a website called Also Asked, and I'll spell it because obviously my accent's quite thick. So it's also and then asked.com. So alsoasked.com. Now, what alsoasked.com does essentially is it's a reverse search tool for Google. So if you type in a subject, it will tell you the most commonly asked questions on Google regarding that subject. Mm-hmm. And what it does is it gives you, in my world, it gives you an endless amount of content. Because realistically, every person you type into that, depending on what they do. So what do you do, sir? I own a recruitment company that specializes in automation services for companies between 50 and 200 headcount. Great. So automation services for small to medium enterprises. I'm going to type that into Also Asked and see what the most commonly asked questions are to do with that. And then they're going to be the starting points for our discussion. In fact, there's going to be about 30 of them on there. I couldn't ask them all, or the podcast would be too long.
Yes, so, it would be.
And you start to see which messages resonate, which ones don't. And honestly, it's never, ever been easier than before to start and to do this. Now, I've seen people do this and they get 50, 60 listeners and they start to lose hope. I promise you there's a way of doing this. It's much easier. And that's one of the things that we love to do is plugging people into that and say, here's the formula that's working for us and all of these people. Welcome to the family.
Awesome stuff. So where can people find you if they want to get connected and find out more about what you're up to?
Good question. So you can either head over to billionairesinboxers.com. You'll find all of our links there, social media links, all that kind of stuff. Best way to get in touch with me, I would suggest, is probably LinkedIn. I have quite an unusual surname, so if you just go onto Google and type in Phil Pelucha, which is Pelucha, there's only one of me in the world. You'll find me.
Awesome stuff. So all those links will be on the show notes. I encourage you to get out there, check it out, see what it is. Definitely connect with Phil on LinkedIn. That's an easy way to get connected with people. Just watch, see what's going on. If he's posting stuff you find and resonate with, comment, like, support it. I think that's an undervalued tool, is just liking and commenting on people's posts, because you show up in so many people's feed as a notification of like, hey, somebody and then you're just getting awareness. So definitely connect with them and tell Phil where you found him, and looking forward to seeing what you guys are up to next.
Sounds perfect. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
No, thank you so much. I think you dropped a ton of value here. Awesome stuff. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.